So where did we leave off? Well, last time we dissected everything we could possibly find about the Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin. I feel it's essential to refresh your memory on our analysis of him because understanding the inner machinations of Martin's mind is the key to understanding the future of Game of Thrones. Martin has a specific set of rules that he follows when crafting a story, and the first and probably most important rule he follows is that good and bad are always and constantly being mixed and intertwined. We can see this in every character in the show. Sure, some tend to lean on the more good side or more bad side, but every character is put through trials of thought where they could teeter on the line of good and evil. This divide between the good and bad becomes so blurred that it's difficult to tell exactly where some people stand. Martin has stressed on multiple occasions that although he was heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings author J.R.R. Tolkien, he purposefully doesn't follow the good versus bad archetype so heavily stressed in Middle-earth. Martin commented on this trope in an interview back in 2011. In Martin's own words, "The whole concept of the Dark Lord and good guys battling bad guys, good versus evil, while brilliantly handled in Tolkien, in the hands of many Tolkien successors, it has become a kind of cartoon. We don't need any more Dark Lords, we don't need any more here are the good guys, they're in white, there are the bad guys, they're in black. And also, they're really ugly, the bad guys." Martin is exactly right. While Tolkien did beautifully handle the concept of the pure good and pure evil in Lord of the Rings, reality doesn't play out that way. Blurring the lines between these two not only creates an atmosphere of realism in the story, but it also keeps the viewers on their toes, not knowing for sure who is good and who is evil. Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger, is a perfect example of this. He seems to purposefully walk the line between these two stereotypes, keeping us guessing as to whether his next move will be a helping hand or a stab in the back. But we see this trope turned on its head with more than just one character. The Night's Watch is cloaked in all black, which normally represents the color of evil, yet their main enemy, the White Walkers, are, well, icy colored. I mean, they aren't really white, but we get it, Martin. You named them the White Walkers. The trope of white being good and black being bad is completely flipped on its head, but blurred line of good and bad continues south of the Wall. Ned Stark, arguably the most pure of heart and good character among all Seven Kingdoms, held his own dishonorable secrets to the grave. His valiant victory over the renowned knight Sir Arthur Dayne was a complete lie, which we learned through Bran's teachings with the Three-Eyed Raven. I mean, now Bran is the Three-Eyed Raven, so I guess he technically taught himself that? I don't know, Bran is weird. Stop groping trees, dude! But the point is that even the most honorable character in the show had his secrets which he used for his own personal gain. Possibly the most important blurred good-bad characters are the White Walkers themselves. In case you've forgotten, in Season 6 we learned that the White Walkers were actually created from men by the Children of the Forest. The Children of the Forest, which up until that point were talked about only in a good light, created the power that threatens to destroy the Seven Kingdoms. And they were created to fight humans because they were destroying the Children of the Forest's way of life. This proves that the White Walkers were actually created to help, not destroy everything. Every character fits somewhere between the sides of the good and evil. As Martin once said, we all have good and evil in us, and there are very few pure paragons, and there are very few orcs. A villain is a hero of the other side. Remember that quote. It will continue to be important as we dissect who will win the Game of Thrones. Remember, no one character is pure good or pure evil, and that will impact who will end up ruling the Seven Kingdoms. And remember, this is not the only trope that Martin completely turns upside down. He kills main characters, creates strong female roles, and actively focuses on characters with disabilities or other issues like Bran, Tyrion, and Varys. If you began a series with a dwarf and a cripple, you wouldn't expect them to last that long through all the war and death that has encompassed Game of Thrones. Yet they are still left standing when insane warriors like the Mountain have fallen. I mean, he has also risen again, not in a Christ way, just in a scary necromancy-ish kinda way, but the point is Martin actively works to make sure the obvious path isn't followed. And that brings us to our second point, to never expect the expected. Martin actively works to be unpredictable and unconventional. Now, this may be an obvious observation, but let's work to put our Captain Obvious insight towards our goal. If we know that Martin actively works to be unpredictable and unconventional, then we should expect the ending of Game of Thrones to follow that same path. This means no happily ever after, no blazing victory for Daenerys, no Iron Throne for Jon Snow based on his true heritage. It can't be that obvious. It can't be expected. To follow up with this idea is Martin's rule that war must never lead to a good ending. It's those who don't want to fight but must that tend to survive and flourish. Look at how many people have died by waging war. Robb Stark, Tywin Lannister, Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Balon Greyjoy, Joffrey, and Roose Bolton, just to name a few. Now, I'm not saying that all these people died during warfare, but that they all had an active hand in warfare at some point or another, and they are all dead. Now, there are people who are alive who have participated in war. Jon Snow, for example, and Daenerys. But Jon never wants to fight. He fights because he must, because he may die if he doesn't. He fights to live, not to rule. Daenerys is still around for another reason, a reason we will address later on. My point is that Martin doesn't like warfare. He was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War and believes that war is more likely to bring destruction than structure to a land. The recent history of Westeros follows this thought process to a T. If waging war brings about no change, then we should not expect a massive battle to be the end-all be-all to Game of Thrones. Martin has gone on record saying that the ending of Game of Thrones is going to be bittersweet, which means that just as we should not expect a happy ending, no more should we expect a sad ending. War won't win Westeros for any side, Lannister, Stark, or even White Walker. Westeros won't be overrun by whites. That would merely prove that the largest united army does win, and Martin wouldn't allow that. The last point we made in our previous video was that Martin doesn't care for the feudal hierarchy system. Nearly every time one person holds all the power over others around him and abuses it, that person dies. We see it with Robert Baratheon, Joffrey, and even the first scene in the entire series when 3 Night's Watchmen go beyond the wall and 2 want to head back, but their leader forces them to continue on. It's those who hold the power but use it to listen to others that live. It's those who are given power by others and respect that choice that survive. Daenerys holds her advisors in high regard. She listens, accepts their counsel, and more often than not, follows it. She's allowed people to choose to follow her or not up until this recent season. We're starting to see a change in Daenerys that we will address in a moment. But for the first 6 seasons, Daenerys ruled over those who wanted her to rule. Jon is the same way. He actively consults his advisors and uses their judgment mixed with his own to yield the best results. He doesn't ask for power, but is put into positions of power by the people around him, and accepts their choice. There's only one difference between Jon and Daenerys, and that is that Jon doesn't want the power he has, but continues to get forced into various situations of power, whereas Daenerys has continued to grow her power throughout the entire show. But that's always been her goal. However, both followings through season 6 consisted of people who chose those two to rule. With all of that, we've dissected a good chunk of how Martin thinks, yet it still hasn't answered the main question of how the series will end. However, it has given us a lot of insight into what Martin will or will not do. Now we can start discussing the most obvious choices for winners of the throne, mainly Daenerys and Jon. But let's begin unraveling how I see the ending playing out based on what we know. Yes, despite Jon pledging his loyalty to Daenerys at the end of episode 6 this season, he's very much still in the running to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Due to Jon's true heritage as the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, we know that he actually has the best claim to the Iron Throne, especially since we recently learned in episode 5 that Rhaegar got a secret annulment and remarried at the same time. Gilly, of all people, while talking to Sam, brought it up before he quickly changed the subject. But that small piece of information means that Jon Snow is not a Snow at all. He's not a bastard, but a true heir to the Targaryen name. From what I can gather, Jon and Daenerys are actually cousins. Based on feudal hierarchy, since all the sons of the Mad King are dead, the line would descend to the son of the eldest brother, aka Jon. However, we've talked about how Martin doesn't like conforming to the feudal hierarchy. It would make sense that Jon would learn of his true heritage, probably from Bran, who can now see into the past and can confirm that he is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. In addition to Bran confirming the story, we also have that interesting scene from episode 5 of this season where Daenerys flies back to Dragonstone on a dragon, lands next to Jon, and unprovoked, the dragon reaches out to Jon to let him pet it. Jon is obviously frightened at the dragon, never seeing one up so close. But the more important reaction is Daenerys. She's seeing her dragon having an immediate connection with someone for the first time other than her, giving her more reason to trust Jon. And it even further cements Jon's heritage as a true Targaryen. So here's how I see this scenario playing out. Jon and his posse go beyond the wall, they come back with proof of the White Walkers. With that proof, an armistice would sweep across the Seven Kingdoms in order to combat the threat. I'm not exactly sure how that armistice would play out. It seems like Cersei would never go for it, but we recently just learned that she's pregnant. If we know anything about Cersei, it's that she will do anything and everything for her children, possibly even to the point of giving up the Iron Throne. If she knows this threat is coming and her child may die, it is possible that she will accept an armistice, at least until the Walkers have been taken care of. With all forces united against the Night King and heading north, it's time to take an inventory break. What do I mean by that? Well, in case you've forgotten, besides dragonglass or obsidian, there's one other material that can destroy White Walkers: Valyrian steel. So we should expect every person with a Valyrian steel blade to make their way north. In case you haven't noticed, during Season 7, the directors have been making a large point to show where those blades are. Jon has one, of course, but he's not the only one. Arya Stark was just given the Valyrian dagger that nearly killed Bran. Sam Tarly stole his ancestral Valyrian steel sword back in episode 6 of the last season. Brienne of Tarth was also given one in King's Landing by Jaime Lannister. But more importantly, during the battle to kill the last of the Tyrells, Lady Olenna specifically pointed out Jaime's blade, the blade that Joffrey used to own, a Valyrian steel blade. Notice how all the Valyrian blades are in the north or heading north in the hands of Sam, except Jaime's, and there's definitely going to be a battle with the White Walkers soon. This leads me to believe he will also be traveling north, likely with the Lannister army, and they will be joining the fight against the Walkers. It's no coincidence that the show has been pointing out these blades, and we've been able to follow them all since Season 1. These blades are important, and they are all traveling north, except Jaime's. To me, this is a direct sign that we will see Jaime Lannister heading north to join the fight against the White Walkers. I believe we will see a great battle beyond the wall, and the humans will eventually win, but it will not solve the issue of the throne. However, with all the people vying for the throne in one spot, we will finally find the last move of the Game of Thrones. With that final battle, death and destruction will rain down on all sides. Jon, Daenerys, Cersei, everyone will be in incredible danger, and one of them will fall. Daenerys, who has been endangering herself over and over while riding her dragons, will somehow fall in battle. Will it be an ice spear to the heart of Drogon, or something equally horrible? Either way, Daenerys has been showing more and more signs of turning into a darker ruler. A ruler that burns people who don't submit to her will like she did with the Tarlys. She will die without naming a successor, much to the grief of her counselors. However, they must choose a successor to her, and there is only one choice: Jon, the last remaining Targaryen, the only one who would be able to control the remaining dragons. Jon will be chosen as the new king by the people and dragons, and Cersei won't be able to stop him. But even as the survivors chant for Jon to become the new king of the Seven Kingdoms, he will decline the position, making it impossible for anyone to take the throne. The people want him and no one else, and he will not serve. This will break the feudal hierarchy, ending the bloodshed of Westeros. And that's the story. You never knew. Wow, that is quite a theory. Is it completely correct?